I have kind of a funny story to tell you to get into this message, and I didn't really know how relevant it was, but it really is, and it's kind of funny. Years ago, when I was working for Greene County Sheriff's Department, and I talk about my experience there. It was a big part of my life, but the interesting thing about the uniforms that we would wear while working in the jail, we wore very tactical looking uniforms. So the patrol officers out here, they're going to wear something that looks a little more classy. Our uniforms were a lot more tactical. Like we would tuck our pants into our boots. They were solid black. And so, I think part of the idea is it gives you kind of this tough look, right? So one day, I think I'm driving home from work, and the back of my truck that I used to have, when I first started here, I still had the truck, had this huge Christian fish on the back window of the truck. It was really large, and there's a reason I put it on there. I really like the story of the ichthus, where they would draw half of it in the sand, and then when somebody would see that symbol, they could finish the actual drawing of the ichthus, and that was a sign for both people that we could openly talk about Christ without any fear of persecution. Now, keep that in mind. That's the point of that symbol, or the reason I put it on there. You are free to talk to me about Christ without any fear of persecution. Now, there is a fear of persecution, and even in the world today, and I know it's not like it was back then, obviously, but that Christian fish symbol did offend some people, and on a couple of different occasions, I got some hateful comments and stuff. But this one was very interesting. I'm driving down the road, and this car comes up behind me and starts flashing his lights and honking at me, and he starts to go around me, and he's making some hand gestures, and he's yelling something at me. And I don't know what he's saying to me yet. So I actually roll down my window and lean out so I can get a good hear. I could hear what he was saying. And about that time, he saw the Greene County Sheriff's Department patch on my sleeve, and he decided he didn't have anything else to say to me. And he rolled up his window, and he shut his mouth, and he just kind of disappeared. Now, why is that relevant to this message? And really, the idea behind this is that the guy was really emboldened, right? He was a tough guy. He thought he was powerful and all that. But then he realized that I was backed by an authority that he was afraid of. He thought he might get himself into some trouble. And it wasn't me, it was the authority that I was backed by. And I just want you to keep that in mind as we look through this message. And we are in the 40th chapter of the book of Isaiah. And sometimes, by the way, I do refer to Isaiah as the Gospel of Isaiah, because parts of the prophecy of Isaiah is the truth, the good news of Jesus Christ. So sometimes it's the Gospel of Isaiah. But we are in the book of Isaiah here in the 40th chapter. Now, right around this time, the book of Isaiah takes a really big turn. And Isaiah, he lived through several different kings. I recently studied about that. I was blessed when Amber asked me to come speak at Hope Homeschool Academy about the book of Isaiah, and I got to share some neat truths with them. But just the other day, it was actually Robin who called me and asked me a question about one of these verses. And I got to thinking about the verse, and Hope is probably on these verses right now, yeah. And it was because of a question she asked me. I got to thinking about it, and I thought, that would be a pretty good sermon. I should preach on that. And that's what I've learned. If I'm thinking about it, I should just go ahead and focus on it and make it into my Sunday sermon unless I have something else prepared. But Isaiah's lived through a few different kings. The book has taken a big turn because they've gone from a really good king to a really evil king. And now Isaiah is offering lots of comfort to the people that are struggling. And he says these words. He says, "Hast thou not known? Haven't you already known?" Think about this. Sometimes when people experience things in their life takes a turn for the worse, they begin to question the God that they had great faith in. So he's reminded them, hast thou not known, hast thou not heard, that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary. So Isaiah is reminding them how great this God that we have is. Now keep this in mind. The God of this universe, there's a few things that we say about him. He is all powerful, he is all knowing, and he is all present. That's what makes him such a good God. If you had two of the three, you'd have a problem. If he was all-knowing and all-present, but not all-powerful, maybe he couldn't meet your need. If he's all-powerful and all-present, but not all-knowing, he wouldn't know how to meet your need. If he's all-knowing and all-powerful, but not all-present, he wouldn't be around to meet your need. It's a matter of all three of these things coming together that makes him such a great God. So don't you know, have you forgotten that we are talking about an everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth? He fainteth not, neither is weary. There's nothing that comes against him that drags him down. Do not forget how powerful this God is. It says, there is no searching of his understanding. And what he means by that is you can search out all of these truths about God all you want, and you will never fully understand how great this God is. A simple way of saying that is imagine God being as great as you can possibly imagine, and then know he's still much better. That's just really a good way of putting that. He is infinitely great. He is so much better, and there's no way that we can fully figure him out. And that does not change because things happen in our life. Keep in mind, this is a prophecy, or this is a prophet who is writing this book. And in this prophecy, God is revealing to him future things. Why? Because there's nothing in the future that God does not already know about. He is outside of time. So that same God that you were serving when everything was great, when there was no problems, he's the same God today, even when you're struggling. He did not change. Your circumstances might change, but God does not change. He is still ruler over all things. And don't forget, whatever you're struggling with, it did not take him by surprise. He's still in charge. And it continues on to say, he giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might, he increases strength. I love this verse, and this is really, it was in a different translation this was asked, but this verse is very good. And what does God do? He giveth power to the faint, or in some translations it may say, to the weary. He giveth strength to the weary. And if he giveth strength to the weary, what's going on? Now let's think about this for just a minute. I was having a conversation with my friend actually about this verse while I was thinking through, and I asked him, what's the difference between being weak and being weary? And the difference is this: a weak person was never capable of the power that is in question. But a weary person was once capable of it, but things have happened that have made them to be weaker than normal. So I want you to think about that for just a minute in your Christian walk. Have you grown weary? At one time were you much stronger? At one time were you a lot closer? At one time were you more motivated? At one time were you closer to God? And due to circumstances in life, maybe you have fallen away. Maybe it's a health issue. Maybe it's a relational issue. Whatever the issues are, have you at one time been capable or performing with much more strength, and now you've grown weary? Now, when I think about this idea, I actually think of weight training. I think of exercise. And here's an interesting thing about somebody who is trying to gain strength. What they do is they go and they put the body in a position where it's performing at its best, but then immediately after, the body is weakened. So you all understand that. If you walk up a few flights of stairs, you are capable of walking those flights of stairs, but by the time you get to the top, you're pretty tired. Maybe you could not go on. It brings you to a point where you're at your weakest moment because you have just done all that you can. Now, here's the interesting thing about how the body works. Once it's been tested that way, it's been broken down, it is the healing process that makes the body stronger in the end. So you have to perform in a way that makes you much weaker, and then you have to heal to become stronger. It's an interesting thing. Sometimes as Christians, we have to go through that process. It's once we go through things and God sees us through that in the end our faith is stronger. Our reliance on Him is stronger. Once we've been tested and we've been proven, sometimes God will trust us with even more. So in the end, growing weary is not necessarily a bad thing if the end result is that you are strengthened at the end. So think about this. He giveth power to the faint. What he's doing is he is taking a person who has been weakened and he is restoring their power. I don't know about you, but there's been many times in my life that I have felt wearied. I've felt beat up. I felt wore out. I felt like I wasn't getting what I needed. Recently, I had a conversation with another pastor about this, that one thing that is really easy for pastors to do is they quit reading the Bible for themselves. They quit having their personal study time, and they're always focused on how they're going to teach it, how they're going to preach it. They're always focused on feeding others, that they begin to neglect themselves. And that's something that I've done many, many times. I recognized one time that it had been a very long time since I had just picked up the Bible just to read it for myself. I was always reading it, looking for how I would preach it or how I would teach it to others. And before you know it, I was neglecting myself, and I realized that I was rather weakened. An amazing thing, though, once you recognize the problem, once you focus on it, once you communicate with God about it, it's amazing how quickly and how well He can restore. And that's what we need to do. We need to recognize the problem. Why am I growing weak? Why am I growing weary? And then realize, where does my strength come from? And then it continues to say, and to them that have no might, He increaseth strength. Now, in this other translation, it says, to the weak He gives power. And I really like that. So He gives strength to the weak, and He gives strength to the weary, and He gives power to the weak. And here's the difference between being weary and being weak. A weary person has been depleted, and so they have that potential to be restored. A weak person was never able to perform at that level to begin with. Now, there's different reasons why a person could be weak. They could be weak because they're brand new to this Christian faith. There's a lot that they need to learn. They haven't gone through so many things. They haven't relied on God so many times. And it's just a matter of taking time to learn and grow. They may be weak because they just haven't been getting into the Word. They haven't been motivated or doing what they should do in the first place. Or, and I think this is a big problem, they're weak because they have not been under good teaching. They have not been reading the Word of God themselves. One of the things, and you guys have heard me harp on this a whole lot, there's a lot of people out there that listen to motivational cliche preachers that aren't getting the sound word. And when they don't get the sound word, when something comes up, they think they have all the answers, and they spout off some kind of cliche, but they don't know anything about the Word of God. And they are very weak in the faith, regardless if they realize it or not. But there's several different reasons that a person can be weak. And you, whatever struggle you're going with, should probably acknowledge what's going on here. Am I weary? Is this something that at one time I was capable of handling and I just need to be re-strengthened? Or am I just weak? Is this something that's beyond my ability and I just need God to strengthen me, to bring me past the point that I've ever been? And either way, whatever that situation is, God is capable. But you have to rely on Him for that. Now, how to apply this, and I recognize that this can be applied to so many different things. There's so many things that are going on in this world that could be the problem, that could make you feel weak or weary. There could be things going on in your personal life that could make you feel weary or weak. So I'm not going to say that this applies to certain circumstances. I'm saying whatever circumstance you're in, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling inadequate, if you're asking the question, what is the godly response to this and how in the world am I going to do that? The solution is the same. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But first, let's look at this. It says, even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. Now think about this for a minute. I've raised some kids. I've had nieces and nephews around. I've worked in youth ministry. I've been around kids a lot. How many of you have been around a kid that you just think that child never runs out of energy? Yeah, Laura raised her hand and smiled and laughed really big because she's got two of them at home right now that just are full of energy, aren't they? And you're like, what in the world? I remember my mom would let me go out and run around and try to wear myself out. I would play baseball or football or whatever, and we'd do these things, and you would begin to be weakened, or get tired, and then you were ready to relax, and that was really a blessing to the parent. And so what is this mentioning? It says the youth shall faint. Why does it say that the youth shall faint? Well, it's because those are the ones so full of energy. There's nobody out there that they're so full of energy that even though it seems like it sometimes, that they don't eventually run out of energy. But some of them just seem like they never run out of energy. My sister-in-law, another funny story, my sister-in-law has this dog who loves to play fetch. And keep in mind, all I'm doing is one hand motion with a Frisbee. That's all I'm doing. And this dog is running as far as I can throw it and running back to me. And I tell you what, my arm gets tired and wore out before that dog gets tired and wore out. It is crazy how much energy that dog has. But the writer, Isaiah, is pointing to those that seem like they never run out of energy. He's saying even they run out of energy. So keep this in mind. If you're running out of energy, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's expected. It's going to happen. So even the youths run out of energy, and even young men shall utterly fall. Why is it young men? Because that is who we expect to be the strongest. And I'm sure some of you would still refer to me as a young man. I do not feel like a young man anymore. I am at the point in my life that I feel like I'm moving backwards. I have to work extra hard just to keep up with where I was at one time. But I remember the first time the doctor said to me, "You're not 17 anymore." And what the doctor meant by that is you can't keep this pace up anymore. Your body's beginning to break down. You're putting yourself through too much stuff. You can't handle that. But we're pointing to the young men because the young men, and let's say 16, 17 years old, or even up to 25, 30 years old, they seem to be the strongest. They seem to be the ones that are physically most capable. If you look at professional athletes in the world, they're typically in that age range. You have a few people that are just crazy what they're able to do, and some of you may hate me saying this name, but Tom Brady is just incredible at his age that he can still win a Super Bowl. But most people, by the time they reach that age, they're not able to keep up. So he's saying even the young men, even the strongest out there will get to the point where they're going to fail too. So if youths are going to grow weary and these strong young men are going to fail, if they're going to fall, it's going to happen to you. So when it does, what's the solution? And Isaiah, again, he's addressing people that their attitudes and everything have changed because of the new king that came into position that was persecuting them, all the suffering they were going through. There were outside influences that were causing this problem for them. So even though the circumstance is different, we can still apply this today, and we know there are things in our life that are going to drag us down. We are going to be weak in some circumstances. We are going to grow weary in some circumstances. He says, "But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength." Well, that's a simple solution, right? Just wait. But here's the problem. And this is the thing that we struggle with so much. How do I wait? And you think, well, that's kind of silly. Well, is it saying that you just sit around and do nothing until God deals with it? That's not what it's saying. But what it's saying is those that keep doing what they know is right, those that keep plugging along, when it comes time, God will be the one to strengthen them. When you think you're at your weakest and you can't go on, sometimes that's exactly when God gives you more strength. It says, "But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not grow weary. They shall walk and not faint." That idea of running and not growing weary, that's something that I look forward to with a glorified body in heaven. That we will not grow weary, that our bodies will not take more than they can handle. But this idea, and this is a passage of Scripture that I just love, this idea that they shall mount up with wings as eagles. Now, our national bird is not a turkey. It almost was. You know why it's not a turkey? Because they didn't want those big dumb animals to represent us. They chose a much more amazing animal, a bald eagle. How many of you guys have seen a bald eagle in the wild? It's pretty neat. Down where we lived right next to Beaver Creek, and every year, either one or sometimes two bald eagles would come down there, and we'd be driving down the dirt road, and I'd see that bald eagle flying up in the air, and you could see that the head, the end of that eagle was white, and I knew that was a bald eagle, and that's a pretty impressive thing, and I always thought it was really neat to see that bald eagle. And then one time, we took a trip. Well, let me back up. The first time I'd ever had a close encounter with a bald eagle is we were at the zoo, and you could walk up and through the glass, there was an animal there. There was an eagle that had injured its wing, and they were nursing this eagle back to health and eventually be released back in the wild if it was ever able to. And that was the first time that I had seen one up close. Way, way, way up there in the air, it was impressive. But when you got close to that thing, you thought, wow, this thing is incredible. It's large, it's powerful, its talons are scary. I mean, this thing is pretty neat. Good thing there's this protective barrier between us because it's kind of scary. So I had been kind of close to a bald eagle before, but there was that protective barrier. I felt safe. Then, here's a cool thing that happened. We went on a missions trip to Dryden, Ontario. And on that missions trip, we were working with this park area. We were tearing down some old buildings, and we were hauling that junk off to the city dump. Now, at the city dump, because people dump things and sometimes there's food there, it attracts a lot of scavengers. And it was the most amazing thing when we went pulling up there and we looked. This is no exaggeration. There were hundreds of bald eagles everywhere. I had never seen anything like that in my life, and I did not expect it. We come over the hill, there's bald eagles everywhere. We back the truck up, and this is what's incredible. Those bald eagles were not scared of us. They came right up to us, and they were looking and keeping an eye out in case we were going to give them some food. And so they start competing with each other and shoving each other around. And all of a sudden, I am in the middle of a whole bunch of eagles that are starting to get very aggressive and be very hungry. And I thought, man, these things could eat me alive in a second if they wanted to. I am very grateful they chose not to. But these things were amazing. They were powerful. I had no idea how awesome these birds are. But there's something else about an eagle that impresses me even more. The Bible says here that they will mount up with wings as eagles. That talks about flying. And I saw that eagle as a kid driving down the dirt road. I could see that eagle way up in the air, and he looked really small in comparison to when you get close to him because he was really high up. But there's something about an eagle that's truly amazing. An eagle can fly so high to where the air is so thin that nothing else can go that high. There's no animal that can survive in that climate. Only an eagle can fly that high. So if there's ever any danger, if there's ever any problem, an eagle can just soar above it for protection. Think about this for a minute. Isaiah chooses to use this animal, an eagle, when he is talking about being faint, when he's talking about being weary, when he's talking to people who are struggling and suffering. He is saying, like an eagle, you can soar. And as I thought about this, and years ago I talked to a youth group, a bunch of young boys, and I said, really, that's what we should be doing as Christians. Every time there's a problem that comes up, we should rise above it. But that's easy and very cliche to say, like I said before. How do we do that? And it goes back, you've got to see the first verse. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They that wait upon the Lord. Which brings up, once again, this very, very important question. How do I wait? How is it? What do I actively do while I'm waiting on the Lord? And here's the answer, guys. You continue doing what you know is right. Even when it hurts, even when you suffer as a result, you continue to do what's right. The God of this universe, who is not lacking in power and ability, recognizes what you're doing. And He's the one that's not going to allow you to fail or to fall when you are doing what's right. And when it comes time, in time, God will be your strength. You are doing what you know is right, knowing, having faith that God is going to take care of it. It's when you give up, when you say this is too much, when you say I can't go on, that's when you fail. That's when you fall. So whatever it is, I have conversations with people all the time that struggle with very, very serious things. And I try very hard not to say, I understand, I know what you're dealing with, because people go through things that I've never gone through in my life. But I always know to say this. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know that struggle. I don't know how that feels. But I know Christ is the solution. You just keep on doing what you know is right, and God will show up and He will strengthen you. God will restore you. God will give you power that you could not have otherwise. Just trust in the Lord, keep doing what's right, and wait on the Lord. It's not an easy thing to hear. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do. But that is the comfort we have, that even when things are bad, even when we're going through trials, even when we're struggling in a big way, the God of this universe sees your need and He does care. There's an interesting thing in the Bible. We have this Jehovah. And Jehovah sometimes is followed by another word that teaches us something about God. It's a very interesting study. We've done it as a church before. I encourage you to do it. But there's these different things. There's Jehovah Nissi and Jehovah Jireh. And there's all these different things about God, the characteristics about God. And one time in particular, when Abraham was dealing with something that he didn't have it within himself, the strength to deal with, where he was going to sacrifice his son. When he was on that mountain about to sacrifice his son, God provided the sacrifice. And I'm not going back through that message. I'm just focusing on this one part. When Abraham saw that sacrifice, he praised God. And he said something, this Jehovah Jireh. And what he was saying was, God sees my need and provides for it. God sees what you need, and God will provide. Maybe not necessarily what you want, maybe not necessarily what you think you need, but in the end, God sees your need and He will provide. Will you stand with me today? In this congregation of people, I know there's many people that are going through things. They're struggling with things. They don't think it's within themselves that they're capable of dealing with it. But I have good news for you. This God that we serve, go back to what it says about Him at the beginning. That He is the everlasting God, the Lord that created the ends of the earth. He fainteth not, He does not grow weary. He is not in any way, shape, or form weakened. He is still God. He is still powerful. And I have good news. He sees what you need. And for those that wait on the Lord, those that continue to do what they know is right, when the time comes, God will provide that need. And it's amazing. It really stinks to go through the trial, but it's amazing how much stronger we are when we come out the other end. It's amazing how easy it is for us the next time to wait on the Lord when we know how He's taken care of us so many times before. It's an amazing thing to realize that even my struggles make me stronger. The things that this world throws at me will only increase my relationship with God if I will wait on the Lord. So we're going to have a time of prayer. And as I've mentioned many times, I love to invite people up to the altar to pray, and you're always welcome to come to the altar and pray. But I love to have this time of invitation, but especially with COVID going on, one of the sad things is it's that fellowship with our brothers and sisters in Christ that kind of suffers, and maybe you're worried about that, and I understand that. If you don't feel safe, and or maybe you just want just your family, those that live in home with you, to gather around, that's fine. But I encourage you, if you have a need, come to an altar, or you can pray right where you're at. God hears your need right there. But let's spend a little time and get a hold of God. Let's not walk out the door without receiving this blessing from God, whether it be strength, whether it be power, whether it be wisdom. Whatever needs you have, reach out to God for that.